Welcome to this remote control quick tip. In this quick tip I want to very quickly talk about the changes that FatShark have made to one of my favourite cameras. This is their 700 TVL line. It's a CMOS based camera, but it gives almost CCD levels of performance. So I've used these on an awful lot on my craft, apart from those where I'm flying it with the widescreen cameras and 960s. But this is the latest one that I've got, so thank you to FatShark for supplying this. It is the 700, but this one is the V2. So this is the one you should be starting to get now as you're ordering through. It has a couple of differences over the original 700. The small one is in the case. The case layout is identical to the original one. Lens is very similar. The only difference is the bits and pieces on the back. There's now a much clearer graphic about whether or not you need the pins connected for NTSC or PAL. So connect the pins for NTSC, remove the jumpers for PAL, which I'll do because I fly PAL. And the connectors and everything are in the same position. So the camera itself is pretty much plug and play replacement for the original, with one small exception. Now, in the video that we did recently on the 960 TVL camera, we talked about how they changed something about how the light was handled and the exposure was measured when the camera was flying. And in the demo video, you could really see how it was handling the exposure really well. Now, I've been flying the 700, the original 700 TVL line camera in summer without any problems at all, because the sky is very bright from the sunshine, the ground is in direct sunlight, and the ground is very bright too. The exposure is not a problem at all. If you are flying in less than ideal conditions, like when we actually shot that 960 TVL footage, you'll find that although the sky is relatively bright because the sun's still up there, even though you can't see it through all that horrible cloud, because the ground is in shadow and is so much less light, then you tend to find that you get problems with exposure. And I'm sure that those of you that have flown FPV have had similar experiences where as you pitch the craft down and the camera's pointing at the ground, you get lovely exposure in wintry days where you can see the ground perfectly, and then as you kind of pull the nose up to reduce your speed and the camera's pointing at the sky, it exposes for the clouds and the ground becomes really dark. This camera is designed to hopefully help with that, and in my testing with this and the 960 version that we looked at recently, it does seem to make a lot of difference. So let me just illustrate what I'm talking about in a couple of slides. First thing is I'm going to have kind of like three pictures. These are actual kind of screens from a flight, and what we're going to do is we're going to see what the exposure looks like when the exposure measurement is in the middle. So you just have to imagine there's like a dot in the middle of the screen and the camera is trying to expose the image in the right way. Now, the first one, where we have quite a bit of sky in that central area where it's measuring the exposure, what it tries to do is tries to find a halfway house, and it starts to expose properly for the sky, but this is exactly what I was talking about. The ground starts to look really dark and you start to lose some of the detail. This happens to me a lot with some of the older cameras when I'm flying in winter, and it can make navigating back home if I'm not using an OSD a little bit exciting. If, however, we pitch the nose down on the craft a little bit, then it starts to get a lot better, because now there's less of that bright sky in the middle of the image. That center portion of the image where the camera is getting its exposure information from is a little bit darker, so it increases or boosts the exposure and we start to get that detail back from the sky. And if we crank the craft over even more, so we're pointing more at the ground, then we get a beautiful exposure, and now it's overexposing the sky a little bit, but we can actually see what's going on underneath us on the ground. So what we're actually doing here is we're looking at that central area in the image, and hopefully with these little dots on you can kind of see how the camera's working. The difference in the CMOS 700 TVL version 2 is that they've moved that spot down a little bit. So let me kind of show you what that's doing. So if we move that exposure measurement position lower in the frame, but we have the same three views, this time what you'll find is that all of them look an awful lot better. And if we overlay where that spot is roughly, then you can see that although the image is the same in each position, because the place that it's measuring the exposure from is more on the ground more often, the ground is being exposed properly in more situations. So that's the difference between the two. So if the exposure measurement is higher in the frame, you kind of get the effect that we've seen at the top. If it's in the lower part of the frame, then it helps with those situations. Again, it makes it better for lower light conditions and times when the sky is a lot brighter than the ground. You probably will see a lot less of this in really bright sunny days because the ground is so illuminated by the sun. So I just wanted to talk about this. So for those of you that are starting to see this come out, it hopefully explains what the version 2 is about and what the differences are, and why, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere like me and you're starting to do your FPV flying in less than ideal conditions, it might be an idea to pop a V2 on your FPV craft. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. There are lots of other videos on the channel and they're carefully ordered into playlists, so you may find that there are other videos on this same subject that you can go and watch. So I would recommend going into the playlist area of Painless 360 YouTube channel and looking around and seeing what there is. You never know what you might find. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and happy flying.